Chapter 18. In the underworld, Livvy stepped into the plaza and stopped. She had half hoped that using the goggles would put her into more familiar surroundings. Apparently that wasn't going to be the case. The village was quiet this time. A big yellow moon was beginning to rise over the rooftops of the nearby homes. The cool breeze was soft. "Back so soon," said a voice behind her. Livvy whirled to see Coco sitting at the edge of the plaza. She set down a small bowl and placed a paintbrush across its rim. "Coco?" Livvy said. Before, she assumed she could see Coco the way any patient could see their shaman in the multiverse. But now, she was no longer a patient, nor were her goggles networked. "What are you doing here?" Livvy asked. "I could ask you the same," Coco said, getting up. She dusted off the back of her dress and adjusted the sash at her waist. "I mean, how is it that I see you?" Livvy asked. "We're both in the underworld," Coco said, as though it were obvious. In L.A., Livvy had defied centuries of shaman prohibitions by networking goggles. She had also learned that a Vodun technique could be used to track a person in the multiverse, but Vodun wasn't practiced on the mesas. Livvy shook her head. "I mean, where I come from, shamans don't see each other in the multiverse, not unless they do something extraordinary." "Exactly," Coco said. "Where you come from. But all the taboos, the struggle to network the goggles, the risk." "Wait," Livvy said. "If I'd brought other shamans here with me, we'd all be able to see each other?" "Oh, no," Coco said, shaking her head. "No, I didn't say that. This is how it is with my people. We work together. We learned long ago it takes more than one finger to lift even a pebble." She nodded at Livvy. "You're different," she said. "But you know that. You're the lightning shaman. You can be places others can't." She gestured toward Livvy and the village with both hands as if to point out the obvious. "My people have been here for thousands of years," Coco continued. "We are connected to our place and each other in ways that others are not. Beyond the mesas, what you say is true. Shamans together means competition and conflict. Here, at the center of the universe, things are different." That was for sure, Livvy thought. Very different. Although networking goggles had worked to save the multiverse from chaos, it had also led to conflict, just as Coco said. Livvy thought of her hip. "Just remember," Coco continued, "that here, even you will play by our rules. Now tell me, why have you come?" "Rules?" But Coco was waiting for an answer. "I'm looking for Tawa," Livvy said. At that, Coco's face screwed up. Livvy had been about to continue, but paused. It was as though she'd said a bad word. "Him," Coco said. "What in the world would you want with him?" Livvy held out the tablet. "He needs to explain this," she said. Coco barely spared it a look. "Oh, that," she said as she sat back down and picked up the brush and bowl. It wasn't quite the reaction Livvy had expected, given how much everybody else was interested in it. In fact, she had the distinct feeling she might have irritated Coco. "Also," she said, "I wanted to thank you for healing my hip and for the crystal." To her right, someone moved in her peripheral vision. It was Dale. Livvy took a step back as he pushed away from the wall of a building. "Is that how you found the tablet?" he asked, "with the crystal of many colors?" "You!" Livvy said. A crack of thunder punctuated the vehemence in her voice as she reached toward the sky. "There's no need for that," he said calmly, still approaching, hands in pockets. "I know who you are." "Then you know I'll defend myself," she said, keeping her hand up. He stepped into the plaza. He was completely at ease, moving slowly but with the grace of a dancer, placing one foot in front of the other. As he passed Coco, he gave a short bow. "Grandmother," he said. Grandmother? They were related? Coco smiled pleasantly at him and inclined her head slightly. He continued his elegant procession, hypnotic to watch. In the tiny house at Walpi, she hadn't gotten a good look at him. She realized, with a shock, he was handsome. The jeans and turtleneck sweater didn't hide his athletic build. Though his lips were full, it was his eyes that were riveting. They glinted a bright hazel over the high cheekbones. He flashed a smile. He's good-looking and he knows it. Movement behind him caught Livvy's attention. A bobcat was following in his footsteps. As it passed Coco, it looked at her and nodded. "Tokotsi," she said to it. My spirit helper, Dale said. He was only several paces away. That's close enough, Livvy warned. He stopped and Takotsi sinuously wound around the bottom of his legs while keeping an eye on her. We've gotten off on the wrong foot, said Dale, putting a hand to his chest, and I apologize. Yeah, I'd call abduction the wrong foot, Livvy replied. The last thing I'd want to do is upset you. He glanced at the clouds above as they obscured the moon, and not because of your spirit helper. He paused and then gazed into her eyes as though he were willing her to see into his. I do believe you're even more beautiful in the underworld. Livvy blinked at the change in conversation. Liar. She heard someone shout from behind. She turned but also sidestepped to keep Dale and his spirit helper in sight. Why am I not surprised? Celestino said, glaring at her. The man from last night. He wore a thick, flat chain of silver and a deep red crystal in the shape of a cube. He's a shaman as well. Was there anybody here who wasn't? He pointed at the tablet. You have no right to that, he said. Don't give it to him, warned Dale, whose easy stance had become guarded. Don't listen to him, said Celestino, jutting his chin out at Dale. Isn't he the one who tried to kidnap you, force the information from you? Livvy looked between the two. I'm the one who came looking for you in the middle of the night, Celestino said, pointing at his chest. I'm the one who helped you back to your car. Look, said Livvy, holding up the tablet. I'm going to make this easy for both of you. All eyes were riveted to the stone. I'm not giving it to anybody. You have no right to it, screamed Celestino. It belongs to the Hopi. He's right, said Dale, stepping closer to her. It does belong to the Hopi. Of course it does, she replied, backing up. I didn't say I was going to keep it. Just let me finish. I must have that tablet, screamed Celestino as a coyote trotted into view. Was that the animal she had seen following her on the tour? Was it Celestino's spirit helper? Then how could it— Run, Dale said under his breath. What? She said just as the coyote suddenly veered toward her. I said run, he yelled. Although Dale tried to tackle it, the coyote easily dodged him. Then the bobcat leapt at it, but the coyote jumped impossibly high, soaring into the air. It was almost on top of Livvy when she reacted. Its bared fangs snapped down on air as Livvy sidestepped at the speed of lightning. The plaza blurred around her, and she skidded to a halt on the opposite side and spun around. Dale was still looking at the place she had just been, his mouth open a bit. But Celestina was bringing out something from behind his back. Livvy raised a hand to the sky. Lightning, she said. As though it had been waiting, the bolt immediately landed with a crash on her hand, and a shower of sparks poured down from her open palm. Both spirit helpers froze, but Celestino was undeterred. He whipped his hand around his waist as though he was throwing a disc, but Livvy didn't see anything there. Quills! Yelled Coco from somewhere behind her. Blast them! Dale shouted. Then she saw them, like a diffuse cloud that blossomed and darkened between her and Celestino. They looked like striped black and white knitting needles sailing directly at her. Needles? A lightning strike would be overkill, and Celestino would be directly in its path. She dropped her arm, and the lightning immediately receded back into the clouds. Whirlwind, she said, reaching her other hand to the sky. A funnel cloud descended, and its furious wind worked right away. Only a few feet from her, the array of needles slowed, vibrated, and then stilled. In the next instant, they zoomed upward into the waiting cavity of the funnel. Livvy dropped her hand. The whirlwind promptly disappeared into the dark and turbulent clouds. Don't move, said Coco, her voice loud in the sudden silence. She was staring at Livvy's arm. Livvy looked down. A single black and white needle protruded through the blouse at her forearm. She hadn't felt a thing. How odd. She cocked her head at it. How had a single needle escaped the whirlwind? As if sensing her puzzlement, Dale said, He threw it with his other hand. Don't. Livvy reached down and plucked it out. No! Screamed Dale, lunging for her.